Our next speaker is Frederick Waldeck from GD in the Netherlands, the Animal Health Organization in the Netherlands. And yeah, it's coming up good. He's going to speak about the comparative assessment of IBR surveillance programs and assurance programs.
Thank you, George, for your introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you also to the organization of the WBC for the opportunity to present this study here in Dublin. I would like to show you some results of a study comparing different approaches to prove freedom of bovine herpes 1. This study was part of a larger RiskSure project funded by the EU. The consortium RiskSure is an international research project aiming at guiding scientists and policymakers in the development of disease surveillance systems in a risk-based manner. A surveillance design framework was developed, and it is available in Microsoft Excel and can be freely downloaded at this website. This particular sub-study of the project focuses on demonstrating freedom of a disease. As a case study to validate the tools, BHV1 was chosen, the herpes virus that causes IBR in cattle. One of the reasons why IBR was chosen is because it is an EU-regulated disease. EU member states can obtain an official free status, and by that can impose restrictions on importation of cattle, but there are differences in Europe in the approach of eradication. The output of the study was based on 10,000 iterations. Objective of the study was to compare the epidemiological performance of EU and alternative surveillance approaches using scenario tree models and cost-effectiveness analysis. So with the RiskSure surveillance design framework, the existing EU BHV1 surveillance design was described, and for the alternative design, it was chosen to take the voluntary BHV1 control program for dairy herds as currently operational in the Netherlands. Let's see how the surveillance designs look like, which components they included. From now on, I will refer to the designs as conventional and alternative. To obtain the free status in the conventional design, all animals older than 9 months have to test negative for antibodies twice, the second time 5 to 7 months after the initial blood testing. In the alternative design, all animals older than 12 months are tested for antibodies once, and this is confirmed by bulk milk testing 4 to 8 weeks later. Once the intake of a herd is completed, the free status is monitored in the conventional design by testing all animals older than 24 months for antibodies in blood yearly. The alternative design monitors through monthly bulk milk testing for antibodies with a minimum of 9 times a year. Purchase is not applicable in the conventional design since EU regulations demand that a herd should stay free of animals with clinical signs or animals originating from non-free herds. But this is left to the responsibility of the herd owner and is not checked. In the alternative design, it is possible to purchase cattle from non-free herds. They are tested in blood upon arrival and again confirmed by bulk milk testing if the animal is lactating. Otherwise, random samples for serology of contact animals are taken. For the record, purchase also includes a fair or exhibition return. To compare these kinds of frameworks, scenario tree analysis is used. The purpose was firstly to calculate sensitivity of each surveillance design by its testing protocol to detect an infected herd with an assumed within herd prevalence of 10%. And secondly, to calculate probability of freedom from infection during 1 year of monitoring a herd's free status in both designs. In the results of this presentation, I will focus exclusively on this monitoring part. Also, important to keep in mind that everything was calculated on a herd basis, in contrast to EU directive that normally focuses on the individual animal. I'm sorry, they took an old version. I'm sorry for that. The designs were run in a few situations in which freedom was monitored. These situations were added to evaluate different environmental conditions and for sensitivity analysis. So we were looking at BHV1 free cattle holding in situation A with no purchase and BHV1 is endemic in the country. In situation B, there is no purchase of BHV1 and BHV1 is eradicated in the country. The differences between A and B is the chance of introduction, since the environmental risk is different. In B, the chance of introduction is extremely low. Situation C then only goes for the alternative design. Animals are purchased and BHV1 is endemic in the country. C shows risky behavior since there are animals from non-free herds coming in. So basically 3 different types of herds are compared, and in a broader context you can read this not only as a herd but as a region, as a country, etc. Then there are a couple of important parameters in the design. Within herd prevalence is 10%, as mentioned earlier. This is also a figure that the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, uses. The chance of introduction of the virus was set at 0.04% per month for an endemic situation and 0.01% per month for a free country. The first was based on figures from GD Animal Health from the existing voluntary program in the Netherlands, where we know that on an annual basis, 0.5% of certified free herds experience a relapse of IBR. This figure is rather low because it is helped by the fact that already more than 50% of dairy herds are IBR free in Holland. The 0.01% is a conservative estimate and really is a worst case scenario. If you are wondering what can cause these introductions, well, think of over-the-fence contacts, aerosols, neighborhood contacts, vermins, persons, materials, etc. The chance of introduction is influenced when animals are purchased, so therefore a hazard ratio of 1.10 was set. Lastly, the sensitivities of the tests, 87% for the blood test and 98% for the bulk milk test, when provided that the animal level prevalence in the group of lactating cows is 10% or more. Enough about methods, let's turn to the results. In this graph, you see time on the horizontal axis and freedom of, probability of freedom on the vertical axis. This is then how the conventional design moves in the situations A and B when looking at probability of freedom over time. So what again was done in a conventional design for monitoring? Well, 1 time a year serology of all animals older than 24 months, indicated here by the star, with the stars and chosen at the 10th month. You see that the lines move down towards the test moment because there are no checkpoints before it. The different chance of introduction of the virus in the meanwhile makes that the line is steeper here in the endemic situation. Now, when we are talking about legislation on BHV1 by the World Organization for Animal Health, OIE, the number 0.998 is an important one, as it is the minimal threshold for a herd to be free of a disease. And therefore, I put these red lines in the graph, and we can see it goes below it when endemic in the above situation A. And this is how the alternative design moves in situations A, B, and C. Monitoring in the alternative design consisted of monthly bulk milk testing, and you can see that by doing that, it always stays well above the red line in all situations. Here, exclusively for situation C, the moments of purchase of 2 batches of animals are indicated by a star. This event, of course, is a potential risk for introduction of the virus, but because there is acted upon it by extra testing at arrival, the probability of freedom does not decrease. So this really is a summary of the graphs you have just seen, but then in table form. And the costs are now added in the last column to compare the designs. The middle part in gray, here is the probability of freedom as I've just shown you in the graphs. Looking at the cost, you will note that they are roughly twice as high as in the conventional. They are roughly twice as high in the conventional design. In the cost, things like the call-out fee for the vet, blood drawing, bulk milk sampling, materials, diagnostics, postage, etc. are taken into account. Costs are indicated for an average herd of 100 milking cows, and this is only for annual monitoring, so not intake. If you would look at this figure solely for intake, you will see that the differences between conventional and alternative become even more significant. Situation C gives a little lower probability of freedom through purchase, and of course it costs more because there's additional testing. So to wrap this up, on average you get the same, but it is more expensive in the conventional design. And we know from experience that it is possible to further reduce the costs of the alternative design when processes are automated. So the conclusion of this study for monitoring of the free status is that both designs perform the same in a disease-free situation, yet the alternative approach is cheaper. In the endemic situation, the mean probability of freedom was lower in the conventional design, so it was not only more expensive, but also less effective. The low frequency of testing in this design might hamper timeliness of detection. A herd goes untested for a year. The bulk milk test is 98% sensitive and at a within herd prevalence of 10%. Performance of the alternative design might be less effective compared to the conventional design at a within herd prevalence below 10%. Yet it is IBR, so usually we see major outbreaks, and bulk milk through its frequency has a great advantage to pick up infections soon. And then here for you the take-home message. Assessment of various surveillance design is useful towards optimizing animal health surveillance. We have seen that the regime to attain and maintain BHV1 free status as described by EU legislation could be ameliorated. This is rather a note for policymakers. For those of you in practice, frequent bulk milk testing is very cheap and effective. Okay, thank you. This is the end of my presentation. My colleague Anouk Veldhuis largely conducted this study. She's an epidemiologist, and the paper she has written is in review at the moment. This is her email address right here, if you wish to contact her, and feel free to do so. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Frederick. We've got time for a couple of questions. If you want to ask a question, then step forward to the microphone and state your name and where you're from. I wonder, Frederick, if you could just explain to me whether it was the GB ELISA or the GE ELISA that was used in this study.
This was all done in the GE ELISA.
So the assumption is that these are all marker vaccinated herds?
Yes.
And does that then impact on the expected prevalence of infection when infection is introduced? Was a different assumption made if the herd's not vaccinated?
Well, this was a model, so we didn't actually test, but if you would do so, we didn't take vaccination into consideration in it. Okay. But of course it stands apart from it when you test in the GE.
Hi, a nice talk. Heinz-Peter Schwärmer from Switzerland. I wonder, can you recommend the risk-score tool you used? So is this comfortable compared to build an own model, or what's your experience with the tool?
Can you repeat the last bit?
What's your experience with the tool you used, the risk-score tool? is this better than building an own model, or is it faster, or what was the reason to use it? You said it was a case experiment. Okay.
Okay.
But what your experience is?
I'm not really sure about that. What I said, Anouk is really the one who conducted the study. She couldn't be here, but to my knowledge, what I learned from him, it's easy to use, and you can take certain tools and add it into a framework, and it's easily usable. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Frederick.
Thank you.